part of my job as an attorney is to go through a contract, and then I will go through it with a client. And I'll say, these are the big points. I want you to understand what you are doing. I want you to understand the ramifications of what you are signing. So for instance, in a lease agreement, right, most of you are going to at some point have an office and you're going to have to sign a lease. And people have to understand that you're not signing it. You might be signing a lease for 3 years. You might be signing it for 4 years. There's going to be a personal guarantee. There might be an option. There might be no option. My job is to go through that contract and then explain to the client, this is what this means. Are you okay with that? Could you do that? You're on the hook for 3 years.
Welcome to the Empower LEP Collaborative Podcast, a podcast to empower, inspire, and collaborate with aspiring and practicing licensed educational psychologists and like-minded professionals. We're your hosts, Jana Parker and Bethany Zoeller, bringing professionals together to talk business, private practice, and find inspiration from our community. Welcome back to the Empower LEP Collaborative Podcast. We are your hosts, Jana Parker
and Bethany Zoeller.
And today we are fortunate enough to have with us a business attorney named Christopher Scott-Dixon. Welcome.
It's a mouthful, isn't it? It's an English name.
Welcome.
And good afternoon.
Yeah, thanks for joining us today. You are going to be one of those guests that I know that our tribe of LEPs are going to hang on to. We're going to hang on to your every word with this because it's like speaking a different language. So I really appreciate you coming on, and hopefully we will understand all the things that we need to know about the topics that we're talking about today.
And they're very interesting.
I'll
make them interesting. Yeah, they're good. Contracts won't be boring.
Okay, give me just a very high level, like, what does a business attorney do? What are the kinds of things you can use a business attorney for? And why would we need one?
Okay, so a business attorney is really somebody who looks at small businesses. So that's why we use the word business attorney and not corporate attorney. All right, because instantly if I use the word corporate attorney, that scares a lot of people just by that name. So I never refer to myself as a corporate attorney. I'm a small business attorney. So I represent small businesses, and we define that usually as between 0 employees up to about 100. So that's a small business, approximately. Or turnover, but usually it's between 0, so you have no employees, one person, right up to 100, 150 employees.
Wow.
So that's the range of businesses that I work with.
That doesn't seem small to me.
No, it doesn't, does it?
I guess it is in the scope of things, but I'm like, wow, that's still pretty big.
Yeah. So you wouldn't mind having 1hundred employees, would you?
I don't think that doesn't sound appealing to me, but Jana might like it.
Yes. I think Jana already has it.
She might already be there, at least a couple.
Right, exactly.
About like 10%.
Small business attorney, but like what
would
I see you for?
So a small business attorney deals with, if I go through the list, it starts off with formations, right? So you're going to form the company, the right business entity for that business. Then we would look at lease agreements. So the commercial lease agreements that you guys have, your offices, or it might be a warehouse or something like that. We're going to look at contracts. Contracts are a huge thing, obviously, for small businesses, and we're going to talk about those later. Ultimately, what we're always looking for, though, is everything up to buying and selling of a business. So we actually call that mergers and acquisitions, but again, that's scary and it doesn't seem to fit. So as a small business attorney, rather than calling it that, I say what it is. We're buying and selling your business. So in 20 years, Jana might say, I'm out, I've had enough, sells her practice. So everything that we do is ultimately leading to that point. And in between that, I have all sorts of things. I get calls every day about, Chris, a client did this. What do we do? So how do we get out of this? How do we get out of that? That's the sort of thing. And a lot of the times it's just, I'm a sounding board, you know, really,
Yeah.
it's almost like a business coach to some degree, which I like. So I've seen a lot of my clients just grow and grow and grow, and it's been amazing to watch.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to hiring you. I just have to have some money.
Yes. Yeah. A little bit.
A little bit of
Just a little.
But I mean, I need so many of these things that you offer, and I've got some things, but oh gosh, yeah. Well, that's a whole other ball of wax. But two of the things that you mentioned are the things that we're going to focus on today. And we, as you know, because I've brought this up with you, we have been talking about that business formation and the entity. And we've gotten some guidance from someone who was very helpful. We had him on the podcast recently. I'm sure all of our listeners have heard his podcast. And we talked about business formation and corporations and professional corporation, S Corp, things like that. And so then after that happened, there's been some more discussion. So we have been putting our heads together and trying to figure out what for our business type, should we have, and I think you've done a little bit more research on this to help us out with this. So,
dive in. All right. So your member, I'll call them members, they will require a professional corp. I think we're all agreed on that, and the other attorneys, we're all agreed. It is ambiguous, but so much in the law is, right? So we have that. If you think about it, we have that in the news every night.
Yeah,
that's ambiguous. Is can a president do this? Can a president do that? And you'd think, well, if they haven't sorted that out, think where we are. So
right.
So it's not nothing is straightforward. But no, I think we've all concluded you have to have a professional corp. And then the reason is, okay, so now that we know what you have to have, and that's if you form a corporate, or if you form something that will provide you with limited liability. You don't have to. You could just be sole practitioners, right? And you just carry on as you are. But we would advise that people form a corporation, and that's because of limited liability. And then obviously the type of corporation that you are required to have is the professional corporation. So that's the why. And the reason we do that is because it limits your liabilities such that someone cannot get to your personal assets in the event of a dispute. And it's not always going to be a client. It may be a vendor, it may be something else. So I'll talk about that later on in a few stories I have as to contracts. But it may be that that's really what we're doing. So it's about protecting yourselves as to your personal assets.
So if we were still, getting started, and when we talked to the tax attorney, he was laying out, sole proprietor versus the S Corp would be our professional corporation that we would fall under. How do we know when to make that move? Because they're not cheap, right? So I mean, I think that's a question that I've been getting lately is well, when do I switch? For me, there was a certain time that it became financially advantageous. I needed it for the tax breaks to switch over my business from a sole prop to the professional corporation. But I don't know, is there a rule of thumb or something that you could help us to better understand that?
I think any attorney is going. I've got a lunch next week with a friend of mine who wants to take his properties out of an LLC because for tax advantages for his nephew and his niece if he dies years ahead. And it's silly, right? It's stupid, but he still wants to have that conversation. I think with you guys, first of all, I want to talk about S Corps because I hope that attorneys hate this, and they should. There's no such thing as an S Corp. And we all get mixed up. And attorneys started this off years ago. What we have is you have a professional corp, or you may have an LLC or just a normal corporation. And then you can elect to be taxed. Right. So you can go to the Secretary of State's website, and I will give you $1,000 if you can find an S Corp anywhere on the website. You won't, because it's an S election.
Yeah.
We've all got lazy.
Yes. Professional corporation with an S election. Yeah. And
And
we learned that we're not allowed to be LLCs just because of how our license works. We fall in this little world.
Right. So you're the same as dentists, veterinarians, me,
Yeah.
you're professionals.
Yeah.
And I think also that's another reason why I think you should look at forming a professional corp sooner rather than later, because of the industry that you're in.
So then the problem, though, after we had this conversation about becoming a professional corporation, is that when you then go to the Secretary of State website, you actually can't as a licensed educational psychologist, because we don't fall under that.
But there's just no little button, that's all.
There's no button. Yeah. So what do you recommend then? Because there is no button. So people are going to be like, wait, I tried to do a professional corporation and I couldn't because there was no button.
Right. And I'd say, well, good. Don't do it yourself. We'll do that. No, seriously. And I'll tell you why as well, because too often people, there's one piece of paper that actually creates your professional corporation, and it's the Articles of Incorporation. It takes 5 minutes to fill in, and people think, great, I've done it. Oh, I've saved all this money. But that's not what you have to do. You have to have your bylaws, right? You have to file your statement of information. You have to understand the rules, and that's really what an attorney is going to take you all the way through. So I'm always there for the first board meeting, even if it's just with one person. We still
That's
elect
how my board meeting was, me and my attorney.
Yeah. And it's great. I mean, they go quite smoothly.
Yeah.
So it's just, I, right. So, yeah. So they go, yes, there are no disagreements usually. We always get it done quickly. And then I'm, if it's my practice, then we prepare the minutes, and then we'll even give them, so that at least once a year, I'm going to be in a meeting. So that's basically the first or second week of January. That's all I ever do. I'm just in meeting after meeting.
Well, so you go to each additional one. Oh,
yes.
I'm gonna call my attorney. He's been standing me up.
Yeah, there you go. So
well,
it's 5 minutes. It's 5 minutes. But then what you can do is in your minutes, it'll say who was present, present. Also present, attorney XYZ.
Yeah.
And that means, and the reason we do this is because remember, it's all about piercing the corporate veil. It's all about your protection of your assets. So that if you are sued and someone tries to, what we call pierce the corporate veil, which is pierce that veil to get at your assets, they'll say, well, you weren't running your business, you weren't running your corporation properly. And then we can go, well, here are the minutes, and oh, there's our attorney. He was in the meeting. And that shuts that avenue down.
Interesting.
So that's one reason we do it.
Right.
Okay, so your answer is
Just
not going to tell us how to check the box, but we should get an attorney to help us check the box. I mean, I don't think anybody's going to try to do it themselves anyway, but like, how do you get around that? You just say you're a general corporation?
Yeah, I think we're looking at general corporate. No, professional. You're still professional. I think it was general corporation, or we're looking at that actually, whether general corporation or the professional corp, and then it's just psychologist, and then you go in the other way. But what we do know is that you're a professional corp.
Yes.
That's what we've all decided. And now we just have to work out the button and what to do to get them to do that.
Okay.
And I have to be honest, I haven't done it with you guys yet. So, but I've done it with, we do a lot of veterinarians who are the worst between us, the absolute worst. I'm always having to call them up going, are you even using it yet? Do you have a bank account? Because what they will do is they will form, this is the other thing people will do. They will form their professional corporation, and they have everything, and they have a binder, they've got the whole thing, and then we say, right, you are ready to go and get your bank account. You have your new EIN number, you're ready to go. And then I'll say, but I want an email to tell me that you've done that, because I never trust them. And then I'll wait a few weeks and nothing. And they'll go, and it'll always be, I'm getting on with that. And sometimes it'll be a year. They're just procrastinating.
So you're attorney / accountability partner.
Yes.
Yes, that's what it sounds like. That's hilarious.
So first people need a name, then they can get their business entity. Oh God, I got balloons. Then
You're just showing off because I can't. I don't like. No, I can't do that.
Yeah, mine doesn't do that either.
No.
I got fireworks the other day. I feel like, Chris, it was in the meeting with you, but I can't remember how I got the fireworks.
I think you did that.
It wasn't.
I just want to see you do it. Were you doing maybe you were a unicorn?
I was doing something.
You're doing
Well,
something.
when I go like this, it does confetti. It'll do it in a second. Come on, do confetti.
Balloons were.
Oh, balloons.
Again.
Oh, see?
Oh, there you go.
There we go. But I can't remember how to do fireworks.
It's always a party in Jana's square there.
Yeah, on Jana's Zoom.
Okay. So here's the other thing, going back to that. Remember, and I could do a whole thing on this. Remember, just because you have a professional corporate, I've actually seen this. I remember going into it was some young guys and they were running a business and they've been sued. And I go in and I go, so you have a corporation. So at least we know the worst thing we're facing. And they said, yeah, it's here. But they'd never used it. It was just, which is actually why I don't use one of those leather binders that's all nice. You get, I call them working binders. So it's just a binder and it's tabbed and I want clients to use it. So I want to see them.
When you say you want us to use them, what does that mean? Like, I mean, I have a bank account and I know I'm supposed to be doing yearly meetings. Like, is there something like what?
I'll show you.
Okay, perfect.
I'll show you. What's this one? Here's mine.
We're all excited to see it.
Yeah, I'm like
corporate binder
in a file cabinet. I don't know.
Right. So here's a working binder, right? So this is my law office.
Okay.
This is my working binder. So page 1 those are my articles.
Okay.
Or tab 1. Tab 2, statement of information. Tab 3 is the minutes. Tab 4 with the bylaws. And then you all get, I don't know, 4 or 5 different tabs to just do whatever you want with. Right? But it is important because if you don't use it, if you don't have your bank account, it's a bit like having a safe and then leaving everything out.
Okay.
Right, that's how I visualize it. So yeah,
I need to put mine in a binder.
Putting nothing in it. That's what people do with their professional corps. So you have to have a bank account and you have to use it.
Right.
You have to use it.
Okay. Well, you would love LEPs as clients because we are notoriously type A individuals. So you wouldn't be calling us. We would be calling you going, what do I need to do next? What should I do? Like, do I need to write this down? Like, when is our next appointment? So you know, or you might really not enjoy that at all. I'm not sure, but we tend to be.
Well, every time we do that, though, we pay our attorney fee.
That's true.
I wish. I don't. I work with a lot of interior designers all over California, and they're the same. Chris, what do we do with this? And they'll be going on a rant, and I'll say, I don't even know who this is, at least, right? So, but no, I think that, as I said, I'm a small business lawyer. It's a passion. Otherwise I wouldn't do it. Mm-hmm. It is a passion. It's more rewarding, I think, than anything else I've ever done. Absolutely. Because I just see the everyday people and the relationships that we get. And I know people say those things, but it's true. The relationships I have and I love watching. I have some clients who have gone from nothing to just being amazing and doing it and being really good people while they're doing it. Their employees love them and I have great admiration for that because it's not easy.
Yeah,
that's cool.
Yeah. Do you have any employees?
I do. I do. And they all love me.
And your dog.
And my dog, yeah. She loves me the most. Yeah. We have employees.
Okay, let's talk about contracts. Okay, we know that the fine print in contracts matters, but I don't know that we know always what is in that fine print and like what in the fine print matters.
I know.
Yeah.
I know. And you and I talked about this and I had to tell you off. So this is what I want you to know about contracts. The first thing about a contract is no one is trying to, or they shouldn't be, no one's trying to get anything over on someone. It's not like, haha, I have this in my contract. We'll see that sometimes, but that's not really what our contracts are going to be. What we want are clear, concise contracts where the terms are there such that your clients can read it and understand it. That's really what we're trying to achieve.
Yeah.
And also what I want and what I do when I draft my clients' contracts is we'll go through every clause, because you have to have some understanding of it, because it's your contract. It's your entire, it's the lifeblood of your business in a way, because that's the agreement that you have with your clients, say with a parent on behalf of the child. So I know you have your professional responsibility matters, but you also have your individual contract with that or agreement with that parent or that guardian.
Yeah, I think there are several kinds of contracts. Like some are like the contracts that we would give to a client. Like and it's hard. I mean, because you don't really know. So for example, like I use and I think Bethany does too, we use a practice portal that says, like that kind of gives you some templates and like, here's what you're agreeing to when you sign this, parents, you're agreeing to our services, and they give us kind of some template language to use, or we make it up ourselves. I didn't get it run by an attorney, what I'm having my clients sign, so I'm not really sure that, you know what I mean? Like, so.
I do know, of course I know what you mean, because I read the other side. I had a client say to me, Chris, I got this, could you review this contract that I'm using? I said, yeah. And they said, I think it's a great contract. And I said, it is a great contract, just not for you. This contract is so biased towards your client that it's not what you should have. It's not what I would have drafted for you. It's a great contract, just not for you. So, so I think, as I said, you and I have talked about contracts a little bit just over the phone. And I think that, as I said to you, that your main, because these are your members, if you like, they're moving away to have their own businesses now, correct?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And of course, so they're going to be contracting with individuals who come to their practice, and then so that's one contract.
Right.
And that contract, this is the other thing, that contract, the client will expect them to draft, right? Here's the contract that you're going to sign.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. So, whereas the other thing I think we had a chat about was school boards.
Right.
So if sometimes the members might be working 2-3 days for a school board, the school board is likely going to provide that contract.
Or if we do just a one-off, like sometimes we do a one-off contract with the school district where they're hiring us just to do one thing as an independent contractor.
Right. But don't be surprised if they want to use your contract.
Yeah, sometimes they do.
They do. Yeah. Okay. So sometimes they do. So no matter what, you're going to have. Yeah, you're always going to have your own contract. It would be really weird if somebody came into my office and I said, "Okay, if you could just draw up, a contract between us," that would be really weird. So it's who's ever providing those services, the one who is drafting the contract, usually, unless you're working with some very, very big hitters or big companies, and then they'll say, "No, you use our contract."
And what about this? And we should talk about all of that if we have time. But I want to talk about, when we get a contract from a school district, what kinds of things in a school district contract are things that we should be, concerned about or looking at. And then I also want to talk about, there's a lot of people who want to have other people contracting with them to do some of their business of the job, like a subcontractor. to do the work in the job. And so I want to talk about that and like what, who
So
could
they
be
might,
the contractor, and then then who would give the contract?
okay, good question. That's more independent contractor versus employee, isn't it? That's what we're getting to there.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. So let's go through it then. So there's going to be the first contract. I always like dumbing things down. It just helps me. So, right. So the first contract will be the one that you are providing your client.
Yes.
This is for, say, an evaluation that we're doing on Thursday in my office. There you go. That's that contract.
Yep.
You need to have that contract drafted by an attorney. The second contract that you would see might be from the school board.
Mm-hmm.
They're probably going to draft their own contract, have it drafted. If they don't, obviously you want to say, here's our right. Some things. So that's the contract they're going to provide to you. And then you want to review it, because there will be things in there that are, well, everything is negotiable. That's something I want all your members to know. Everything's negotiable. Whenever I get contracts and there's other attorneys, we spend sometimes weeks going back and forth. These are big contracts, but weeks going back and forth over different parts of a contract. No, we're not prepared to do that, or we'll do this, but that language has got to go. And the other thing is that there are certain terms in a contract that you just would not understand, that are terms of art, but they have a legal significance. For instance, best efforts. So you might see best efforts everywhere. I don't like best efforts. We want reasonable efforts, because best efforts means anything. There's nothing more we could have done. Reasonable efforts or reasonable efforts would be what's reasonable in our industry. What's reasonable amongst LEPs when they are dealing with a client. So right there is a standard that's really, really important to have. You want to have reasonable, because it reduces the expectation, the liability.
Yeah. So when I am working with an individual client, a person comes in off the street, and I am going to provide this service for them. I'm assuming I provide what we call, oh my gosh, just totally what is it called? The consent. What is it? Tell me,
Informed
Jana.
consent.
Informed consent. Thank you. So in my informed consent, it does go over, their patient rights and their, the time frames and my licensure and all those things that I need to have for informed consent. But in it, I also talk about my fees and those sort of things. You feel like it needs to be an additional document that is, or can that do both parts, like with the expectations? Yes. Okay.
It can do both parts. Well, any attorney will say, I'd like to review it. But it can do both, right? But it can do both parts. But a lot of that contract is going to be the same amongst most of you. It's going to be similar, because that's the legal. I hate using that word. It's the legal part. But there's also going to be some parts that are what I call, or how I explain it to my clients, are client decisions. Or business decisions is actually a better word. They are business decisions. So you might want a higher fee than somebody in another part of the state.
Okay.
So that's a business decision. Cancellation policy. I don't think that's a uniform thing. I think you can decide what you cancel. Okay, therefore that's a business decision. So how it works with the client, or my clients, how it works with my clients, as opposed to, say, we're mixing it up, your clients, is we go through that with them and say, okay, so, what's your hourly? And sometimes I'll say to them, you're not charging enough, right? So, because again, that's the coachy thing coming in. You're not charging enough. You've got to up it a bit. And I think also, so when we're looking at that, but that is, again, a business decision, but it's also something that you can change. If you feel like you need to or want to discount a particular client, you can do so. Everything is negotiable. If somebody says to you, and again, I don't know the ins and outs exactly I know a little bit, but not a lot of how your practices work. But you see some people for many sessions, correct?
Sure.
Once you
Yeah.
after the initial evaluation. So I would so it may be that for some people they go, well, I will do it for this hourly fee, say between up to 12. Between 12 and 30, it will reduce it some. We can reduce it by 10%. So you can do whatever you want. It's up to you.
Okay. But
Those
you're
are
saying
business.
that was just as I was hearing the word contract, I'm like sitting there thinking, I'm like, well, in my private practice, am I using a contract? But I basically am, and it would be helpful for me to have someone like you look over it and make sure that, I've got my informed consent side, which is the more ethical guidelines that I have to meet. But then you would be that additional, like the semantics of the business language, making sure that it was covered.
Yes, we want to know, like you, obviously, I would guess you both have cancellation policies.
Yeah.
Right. So, and are they the same? I mean, we don't know, right? So, but maybe that you
What's
have
yours,
different.
Jana? Oh.
Yeah,
No,
right?
but do you need like if you go into Chat GPT and you say, make me up a client contract for, having a client, like, does it need I mean, I didn't do that, but like there are templates written in our thing, right? So you could use the template and then, but why would you want it reviewed by an attorney or not? Like I've just had it in there. Like, how do you know, what would an attorney do that would make it stand up if somebody
Because
wasn't okay with it?
because the problem I'll quietly say this. I have a colleague whose whole practice is suing legal, right? So their whole practice is suing a document company because that's what these companies are. They're not even allowed. It says we do not provide legal advice, right? So if they don't provide legal advice, they're basically saying, here's a document, there you go. And I can't do it. I've never been able to do it. Not one. I've never just said to somebody in my entire career, yeah, there's a contract for you, because I have to understand the business, and we have to go through it and say, okay, how does this happen? It's always different. For example, interior design companies, you would think, having done, I don't know how many, that I could just go, here's your contract, but I can't. I have to talk to every one of them at least twice, because they all have a difference in the way they do their business or the way they want to.
But would there be like a reason that it would not uphold somehow? Like if a client came back and was like unhappy with something and you're like, well, this was my cancellation policy, would it have been different if I had run it by an attorney? Like, what would I do then? Would I be like, oh, Chris, here's my contract. You didn't make it, but can you help me with this? And you'd be like, no, because I didn't write. I don't know. Like, how does that work?
No, right. Yeah. Okay. So, there's a difference between, here's a contract, and understanding the contract. If you don't understand the contract, you really don't know what you're getting someone to sign.
But what if you made it up yourself? I mean, I know what my cancellation policy is. So if somebody said, well, it's 24 hours and I want my money back. And I say, well, mine is 48 hours. So you pay half.
Okay.
And that's what the cancellation policy says.
Right. That's one clause. Right. There's quite a few clauses in the contract.
So you're saying like we should have, I mean, I think this is what I'm hearing, is that you're going to know all the things that we needed to have in there. Whereas we're putting forth the things that I know, I have things in there about my cancellation fee, and I have things in there about, payment rendering and those things, but you're actually going to know all the things that are supposed to be in there in addition to, or I don't need certain things.
Well, I think we also assume that, remember, cases go all the way to the Supreme Court on one word and how it's different. So the idea is you could write something and you could say, right, there's my cancellation policy, but is it ambiguous? So an attorney is trained to go, oh, we can't say that because that could mean this and it could mean that.
Got it.
Right. So the idea is that as an attorney, what we're trained to do is go, what does that actually mean? And could it mean something else? And no, we take that out. We're always, we'll rewrite a clause. It sounds incredibly boring, but yeah, Saturday mornings I'll be going, I prefer that word, and I'll run over to I'll run over to my desk and go, I think that's a better word. That's better. That's
Wake up in the middle of the night.
Yes, right. It's a sad life. It's a sad life. Right?
Okay, so that I think I understand. So thank you. Let's move to like if you have a school contract, because sometimes there are a lot of things in school contracts. And this is like a whole other like can of worms I'm not going to open right now, but sometimes they'll say things and I'll be like, I'm just going to say, okay. But like, then they never ask for it. But what if they did ask for it? If they did ask for it and I signed it, then I have to, if they're like.
Okay. So that was incredibly clear.
Right. I can be more clear.
No, I understand what you're saying. So again, those no attorney is going to discuss a contract really that they haven't reviewed, because we don't have to review it. But I will give you this example. I'll give you an example that might illustrate it. So one of the things clients do this all the time. I get called up and they'll go, Chris, can you look at this contract that I signed? All the time. And I'll go, yeah, okay. And I'll look at it and then they'll say, I don't want to be in this contract anymore. Can you, I have one of these, I swear. My dad said I should just tell them, give them 7 days or a month. That's fair. And then, we're out of it. So I said, okay, well, let me review the contract. Well, the term was 12 months. They were 4 or 5 months into this contract. It was for $12,000, $15,000 a month. A lot of money to a small business. And they wanted out. And they thought they could just go, I just don't want to do this anymore, but thank you. No, of course not. Because the term was 12 months. There's nothing illegal about the term. It's not like a lawyer is going to be saying, this is illegal. No, there's nothing illegal about that term. The problem is people don't read their contracts. They don't read contracts. And now my client's on the hook for 15 times 10, 150, over $100,000. So what we had to do was look at the contract, find a few words that would be against the other side, the other party, and so that we could then try and get out. And we required what's called a material breach, and we got it. So I could get them out of that contract, but that's not usual, and we don't want to go down that road. What we want is, if you have a contract and it's a reasonable amount of money, in other words, it would hurt if something went wrong, just get your attorney to review it. Okay. It's madness otherwise.
I just think that there are sometimes things that school districts ask us to have that we may or may not have. And sometimes they check and see if we have it, and sometimes they don't. Or sometimes they say, we want you to, or like the contract maybe said, we want you to itemize the hours that you do. But when you bill them, you just give them a flat rate. And then they go, oh, we want to see your itemized. And you go, well, that's not how I do it. But you signed that, so sometimes you sign things that you may or may not know that you're signing. And then you don't want to do, or you don't have the insurance per se.
Well, that's actually a biggie, right? So
sometimes they check and sometimes they don't.
Right. Again, part of my job as an attorney is to go through a contract, and then I will go through it with a client, and I'll say, these are the big points. I want you to understand what you are doing. I want you to understand the ramifications of what you are signing. So for instance, in a lease agreement, right, most of you are going to at some point have an office and you're going to have to sign a lease. And people have to understand that you're not signing it. You might be signing a lease for 3 years. You might be signing it for 4 years. There's going to be a personal guarantee. There might be an option. There might be no option. My job is to go through that contract and then explain to the client, this is what this means. Are you okay with that? Could you do that? You're on the hook for 3 years. Are you able to sublease? So we want to see that in the contract.
Right.
We might want to say, so an option means an option to maybe extend that lease, right? So we might say to the client, look, I don't really want you to be in this space. I think you might, if you're telling me you may outgrow it in 3 years, that's your plan, then why are we signing up for 5? Wouldn't it be better to do 3 years? And then at that time, when we could say, okay, we want an option for another 3. Because what we've done then is we've just taken those next 3 years, and if we don't need them, we're in control. Don't need them. So I see the small businesses and leases, commercial leases, are huge. It's one of your biggest expenses.
Right.
Right.
Okay. So we should be running those by an attorney.
Yeah. So that's something. So the small business attorney is going to basically say, okay, these are the 4 or 5 things that I need to see. And then, of course, the other contracts we were talking about, I think when we were on the phone, was your vendor contracts, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you've got your contract for your services. You've got that contract for your commercial lease, which is a contract. Even though it's called a lease, it's still a contract. And then you've got the others, which are your vendors. And for most of you, that might be the person who does your website. It might be the person who does your PR.
Mm-hmm.
And those PR people will try and get a term of a year. And then they'll say something like, because I've got people out of these contracts, they'll say something like, well, the way we work is it takes a while for this to get going. But you're going to be very pleased with us. Well, if you're going to be so pleased with them, why do you need to give them a year? Maybe that you just go, look, after 4 or 5, I can understand 4 months, but if you're not really getting, there's just no relationship between, say, you and that person. You can't get out because you've still got another 8 months to go. So that's why, you want to understand what's in that contract.
Right. Okay. And I know this was not on our list of things to talk about, but I think it's important to talk about, is if you, as the person with the business, and you want other people to come and work for you, the difference between an employee and a contractor, and when is that okay, and when, and who would be doing the contract at that point, and
Right.
and would that, how do you know whether someone should be a contractor or a W-2 employee?
Okay, so the rules changed a few years ago, actually. Newsom changed. There's a new rule came in, so we now have factors ABC. So basically, how that works is this. And by the way, I've never had a client say to me, "No, Chris, they are employees." When I'm going, no, they're independent contractors. Not once. Because everybody wants them to be independent contractors because it's cheaper and it's less hassle. We don't, right? So, but it's not up, I always say to this, it is not up to you or the other party as to whether or not they are an independent contractor or an employee. It's not going to be up to what you decide. Or that you can't sort of say, have a piece of paper and say, but we both signed it. No, California will decide at some point, no, that person is an employee. They're not an independent contractor. And how we determine that is to look at, we'll look at certain factors like, are they directing the operations in your business, or are you telling them what to do? Right. So, or are they using their own equipment, are they coming into your office all the time? Are they doing the same thing that you are doing? So for instance, if I have if I have a web designer, they're going to be an independent contractor. They do their own thing. I don't provide web designer services, so it's different from what I'm doing. And ultimately, they can decide when and where and what and how they're doing their work. So they're going to be an independent contractor. Where it gets murky is when we're doing the same things. Some businesses, they're like realtors, they're independent contractors, even though they're working under another realtor. So the law allows for that. So there's some, I know everything's complicated. Why is everything so complicated? But it is. So there are some things where they go, no, okay, we understand that. So even with lawyers, they might say, okay, you'll be classified as an independent contractor that way. Dentists, this came down, I think 2 years ago. All the dentists that were working as independent contractors and would go from one day, they do 2 days here and a day there and a couple of days there. That all had to stop. They were all told, no, you are not an independent contractor. You are an employee. So everything changed. Sometimes California will go down, and they did this with a friend of mine who owned yoga studios. They start in the north and they're going down and they're basically looking to decide whether or not yoga instructors are independent contractors or not. Because the same thing as dentists, they're teaching a class and then they're going to another yoga studio, and it's the case as well, are they independent contractors or are they employees? The yoga studios are going, oh, well, they're going to other places. And I'd say, fine. Part-time, remember the word part-time employee? So you might be here for a day, like a dentist. Great, you're a part-time employee then.
So what if, oh gosh, I just lost my question.
I will say this. In your industry, I'd have to actually research.
I know what my question is. My question is like, how would anyone know or care what a small business like ours was doing? Like, what if I'm a psychologist and I have my own practice, but I have too much work, so I want to bring somebody else on, but they already know what they're doing because they're, like they are a professional too, and I want them to take some of my work, but it's under my business. Like I'm giving them some cases, but they're an independent contractor. Like, number one, should they be an independent contractor? But then number two, who's the contractor police who'd come and say like, oh, you are not an independent contractor, like you should be an employee? Like, how are people even going to know or care?
They know, and it's like years. I just know a vet, and she said to me once, she said, I cannot tell you how many times people say to me, well, we're all dog people. My dog likes being in the back of the truck. Who knew he was going to jump out? Well, when you know, and it never is a good ending, right? So, well, I want everyone to remember that. So,
Yes.
Right? So it's never, so yeah, it's, these restaurants that were going well and they were always full and then suddenly they're closed down. It's because the police, the powers that be have come in and they've closed them down. And it might be something, it'll happen like this. Somebody will cut their finger, a chef or something. He'll go to the hospital and they'll say, right, where do you work? Well, we need your workers' comp information. And they'll say, oh, I'm an independent contractor. They have to file a report. That's the end of that. And you'll have restaurants. I'm in San Diego. There's several restaurants and they've been there 20 years. And then because of that, small restaurant shut down because of all the penalties, etc. It's not worth it.
You know what? That's a really good point. And I was just thinking about this. I can't remember who I was talking to, but like, this is definitely something that in our field, I think people are trying to navigate and figure out. so here's a question, like, what if, I have a business, I want to contract somebody to come to take some assessments. I have a contract with a school district for an assessment, and I'm going to put this person on that contract. Okay. I'm saying I have the insurance. I have, the right insurance for this contract. I have general liability, right? But this person that I've contracted with on the side is actually going to do that work. I feel like there's something wrong there. Like, I think if something happened to that person doing that contract, or something happened with that case, but they're an independent contractor, like, who's on the line here? We did the contract with the school district.
You are.
I am.
Who did the school board contract with?
Me. I mean, I'm not going to do this ever, but,
No.
but yeah. Okay. So I'm on the line if that happens. And that's a big problem.
Yes.
Okay. That's scary. That's scary.
Well, it's only scary if you're not doing everything correctly.
Right.
If you're doing it
right. That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. I think it's really important for the field to hear this, because it's the person who is accepting the responsibility and doing the contract with the school district. I would just as soon say, like, I don't have the time. Hey, you go do the contract yourself with the school district, right? Or make that person an employee, and then you do assume the risk, but then you have the insurance and everything to back that up too.
Remember I was saying to you at the beginning that everything we do as a business attorney is looking for ultimately whether or not that business is sellable. Right. So one of the first things we look at so a client might be buying a business or practice or whatever it might be. And one of the first things we look at is, are there independent contractors and employees? If they are wrongly classified and they are using independent contractors and they should have been employees, then the value of that business is going to go down a lot. So that's the other thing. You have to set your business up or your practice up such that you could sell it.
That's so interesting, because I don't think that's something that we think about when we start our business. We just think, I want to do this business, right? But you're right. Like, I mean, I don't even think about like when I want to sell it, I don't think we get into it thinking about that, but you're saying that's the only reason really you start a business.
Well, it's something that we should always think about.
Right.
Do I have a sellable business? And then we're getting into, are you really running a business, or are you just an employee doing a 9 to 5 and it just happens to be that's your business?
Right.
So which is another huge thing, I think, for small businesses. But for another day.
God, yes, for another day.
That's a really good question, and how to figure. Yeah, of course, we're at the end of our time, but as we throw out this deep philosophical question, yeah.
Well, this is really interesting, Chris, and I really appreciate you coming on and talking about this, and I appreciate that, hopefully people will be able to use you as a resource. So, how, do you want people to be able to reach out to you, if they have questions and need an attorney?
Mm-hmm. Of course, yes. Yes. So, do you put my email up, or do I give it to you?
Yeah, we'll put your information in the show notes, but in case people are listening and they just want to write it down, how do people find you?
Chris at csdbusinesslaw.com. So Chris at csdbusinesslaw.com.
For Christopher Scott-Dixon.
Exactly.
Nice. Well, thank you. This has been enlightening, a little bit scary, also funny. Thank you for all of your stories, and for talking to attorneys, it's always really intense. You've made it fun.
Well, otherwise I couldn't handle it. So there you go. Right.
I think the accent helps.
Yeah.
The accent
but
helps.
It should be fun. It should be fun. Right.
Yeah.
Remember, this is business. We're supposed to be having fun. We're supposed to be doing good work. We're supposed to be having fun. We're supposed to be making a decent amount of money for what we do. Otherwise, it's just too stressful otherwise. to run your own business. So this is what we should be doing.
Yeah.
But it does take a number of people. It does take your lawyer. It does take your CPA, because that's what you need. It does take your bookkeeper. It does take those things.
Absolutely.
And a lot of small businesses try and do everything themselves, and that's when I think they run into problems.
Right. And I will say, the thing I do most now is work on my business, right? So like, it's like when you're thinking about going into private practice, you have to think about, do I want to be my business, right? Or do I want to have a business that I'm running, right? And it is very different. And and once you get into like making that commitment to having a business, like a business, you realize like how much help you need, and how much time it takes. And I appreciate that I've been meeting people who can help us do that.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, what's the phrase are you running the business or the business running you? Isn't it? I think that's what the phrase, and that's it. Yeah. So,
yeah.
And I know this, a lot of, I've worked with several psychologists in different fields. They get burnt out.
Yeah.
You get your PhD, and then 2 years later, they want to do something else. Yeah. And that's what we want to avoid, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you, Chris. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for coming on and enlightening us and helping us figure out this world of business law.
It's fun, isn't it? No, but pleasure's all mine. Thank you very much for having me. I've enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you for listening to the Empower LEP Collaborative Podcast. Episodes can be found at empowerlepcollaborative.com. If you liked what you heard, please leave us a 5-star rating and review on your favorite podcast player. If you'd like to be a guest on our show, or if you have any questions for us, don't hesitate to connect. We would love to learn more. Jana can be found at jana@empowerlep.com, and Bethany can be reached at bethany@lepcollaborative.com.